Don't touch anything in that suite. You don't belong here. I don't care what your reservation says. People like you don't stay in rooms like this. The lobby of the Ashford Grand was marble and silence and a kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature. 43 other guests passed through that lobby that afternoon. None of them were asked to produce their reservation a second time. None of them were told their card had flagged an issue, while a manager was quietly called from a back office. None of them had a security guard appear at their elbow within 90 seconds of check-in. Only Adelaide Marsh. By the next morning, every senior executive at the Ashford Grand's parent company had received the same email. It did not come from an attorney. It did not come from a journalist. It came from Adelaide herself, and attached to it were 47 pages of documentation she had been quietly assembling for 11 months. Let me take you back to where this started. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Late September. The kind of morning where the air sits heavy and wet against your skin before the sun has even cleared the rooftops, and the streets smell like last night's rain on hot concrete. The Marsh family home sits on a corner lot in the Gardere neighborhood, a 2-story brick house with a covered porch and a fig tree in the side yard that Adelaide's grandmother planted in 1962. The tree still produces every summer, more than anyone can eat. Adelaide puts the extra up in jars and lines them along the back of her kitchen counter. Adelaide Marsh is 51 years old. She wakes at 5:15 without an alarm, the way she has for the past 20 years. She makes coffee in the same pot her mother gave her, sits at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and reviews her notes for the day. Not a planner, not a tablet, a legal pad. She fills about 3 pages of it every morning in a handwriting so precise it looks typeset. She chairs the board of a regional infrastructure consulting firm she built from 11 employees to 430 over 19 years. She sits on 2 nonprofit boards. She holds a doctorate in civil engineering from Howard University and a law degree from Tulane that she finished at night while managing her first major highway contract. She keeps the diplomas in a storage box in the closet. She doesn't think of herself in terms of credentials. She thinks of herself in terms of what still needs to get done. Her husband, James, is a high school football coach. He makes her laugh every single day, which she says is a rarer qualification than either of her degrees. Their daughter, Nina, is 24 and finishing a residency in pediatrics in Atlanta. They talk every Sunday evening, sometimes for 2 hours. The trip to the Ashford Grand was James's idea, their 30th anniversary. He had saved for it without telling her, booked the suite himself, made the reservation 6 months in advance. He wanted somewhere extraordinary. The Ashford Grand was rated the finest hotel in New Orleans, and James had a gift for big gestures, delivered without a trace of self-consciousness. They drove down together on a Friday afternoon. James had a cooler in the back seat with drinks and the mix of gas station snacks that Adelaide pretended to disapprove of, and ate more than half of every road trip. They talked most of the drive, the way people talk who have been married long enough to know which silences are comfortable and which ones mean something. By the time they reached New Orleans, the light was going orange, and long across the Mississippi, and James was already grinning at the skyline like a kid. The Ashford Grand's lobby was everything the website had promised. High ceilings, fresh orchids, staff in white shirts, moving with the quiet precision of people who had been trained to be invisible and pleasant simultaneously. Adelaide and James walked to the front desk together. The clerk who looked up at them was named Spencer Tilton, according to his name badge. He was in his late 20s, with a pressed collar and an expression that arranged itself into a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. James gave the reservation name. Tilton typed something, looked at the screen, typed again, looked up. "I'll need to see a credit card for incidentals," he said, which was normal. James handed one over. Tilton ran it, handed it back. Then he typed something else and said, without looking at them, that there appeared to be an issue with the reservation. "What kind of issue?" Adelaide asked. "A system flag. It happens sometimes, if you'll just give me a moment." They gave him a moment, then several more. Tilton picked up the desk phone and spoke quietly into it. 2 minutes later, a man in a charcoal suit appeared from a door behind the desk. He introduced himself as Warren Ogle, the guest services director. Ogle looked at James, looked at Adelaide. Something moved across his face, brief and calibrated. "Mr. and Mrs. Marsh, I apologize for the delay. We're showing a discrepancy in the original booking. The suite you reserved was actually double booked, and I'm afraid it was released to the other party this morning." James said, "We booked 6 months ago." "I understand, and I sincerely apologize. We have a standard room available at the same rate." "We did not book a standard room," Adelaide said. Her voice was completely even. "We booked the anniversary suite. That booking was confirmed twice by email." "I have both confirmations." "Yes, ma'am. I see that, and again I apologize. We can offer the standard room tonight and look into availability for—" "No," Adelaide said. Ogle blinked. He had not, his expression suggested, been told no very often. "We'd like to speak with the general manager," Adelaide said. "Mr. Renwick is unavailable this evening, but I can. Then we'll wait." Ogle straightened his jacket. "Mrs. Marsh, I assure you, I have full authority to—" "I'm certain you do," Adelaide said pleasantly. "We'll wait for Mr. Renwick." That was when the security guard appeared. Not running, not dramatic. Just present, the way a shadow is present, materializing near James's left shoulder, with his hands clasped in front of him and his expression professionally blank. He had not been called for any of the 12 guests who'd checked in the previous 30 minutes. Adelaide noticed that. She noted the time on her phone. 6:47 p.m. James saw the guard, and something shifted in his jaw, a tightening so small only Adelaide would have caught it. He had spent 30 years learning to measure the distance between a moment that passed and a moment that didn't, and he was measuring it now. Adelaide put her hand on his arm, once, lightly. The general manager, Mitchell Renwick, appeared 11 minutes later. He was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired, practiced at projecting a particular brand of reassuring authority that had served him well for decades. He shook James's hand. He explained the situation with smooth regret. The suite was unavailable. He could offer a room on the 14th floor, which was, he noted, a very pleasant room. The rate would be honored. He was so sorry for the inconvenience. James started to say something. Adelaide said quietly, "We're leaving." Renwick looked surprised. "Mrs. Marsh, if you'll just, please have our bags brought to the lobby." They stayed that night at a Marriott 4 blocks away, which had a perfectly comfortable room and a breakfast buffet that James ate with more appetite than the occasion called for, because James processed disappointment by being hungry. Adelaide sat across from him with coffee and her legal pad and wrote 6 pages of notes. Everything, every name, every time stamp, every word she could reconstruct verbatim. The security guard's position, the order of events, the number of other guests who had checked in without incident. She didn't say much over breakfast. James watched her write and didn't ask what she was doing, because he knew his wife well enough to know that when she went quiet and precise, something was already in motion. "Are you okay?" he asked after a while. She looked up. "Are you?" He considered it. "I'm angrier than I'm showing." "I know," she said, "so am I." She turned back to her legal pad. "Don't let it go," he said. "It wasn't a question." "No," she said. "I won't." What Adelaide did over the following 11 months was quiet, methodical, and entirely invisible to anyone at the Ashford Grand. She began with public records. The hotel's parent company, Renwick Hospitality Group, was publicly traded. Its annual reports were filed with the SEC, and available to anyone willing to read 400 pages of footnotes, which Adelaide was. She spent 3 weekends going through them. She was looking for patterns in guest complaint settlements, in discrimination claims, in the language used in HR documents obtained through a prior lawsuit that had been settled quietly in 2019. The 2019 case involved a black guest in the Atlanta property who had been denied a reservation that was later given to a white guest on the same date. The settlement was sealed, but the initial complaint was not. Adelaide read it 4 times. She contacted a guest experience researcher named Dr. Philip Osiware at Tulane, who had published extensively on racial disparities in luxury hospitality. She didn't tell him why she was asking. She asked him to recommend his 3 most rigorous published studies. He emailed her the PDFs within an hour. She read all 3. She hired a private investigator named Connie Beauchamp, a woman who had spent 12 years in the FBI's Civil Rights Division before going private. Adelaide gave her one instruction: document what you can document. Beauchamp spent 6 weeks making reservations at Ashford Grand properties under names that were identifiably black and identifiably white. Same dates, same room types, same presented credit profiles. She kept records of every interaction, photographed every exchange she could, and noted every instance where the experience diverged. By the end of 6 weeks, she had filled 2 binders. Adelaide's corporate attorney, Hector Vasquez, had been her counsel since the firm's early years. He was methodical and skeptical in equal measure, the combination she valued most. She sat across from him in his office in November and put Beauchamp's binders on his desk. He read for 40 minutes without speaking. Then he said, "This is a pattern." "Yes," Adelaide said. "Across 5 properties. 6, now." She found a 6th in December. Hector looked at her over his reading glasses. "How long have you been building this?" "Since the night they put a security guard next to my husband for asking to see the general manager." He was quiet for a moment. "You know this will be public." "I know," Adelaide said. "That's the point." During those 11 months, the Ashford Grand operated as if nothing had happened. Renwick sent a form letter of apology 3 weeks after the anniversary weekend. It was addressed to valued guest and offered a complimentary night's stay. Adelaide filed it in a folder labeled Hotel Correspondence. She did not respond. What she did not know was that Ogle had also made a call, the week after their visit, to a colleague at a competing luxury property in New Orleans, where James had a membership through his alumni association. He had described James as a difficult guest with a history of unreasonable complaints. He had not put this in writing, but the colleague he'd called had been unsettled enough by it to mention it during a staff meeting. And one of the people in that meeting was a woman named Francine, who happened to know Adelaide from a charity board they had served on together. Francine called Adelaide in January and told her what she'd heard. Adelaide wrote it down. She called Beauchamp. Beauchamp located a third party who had been present in the staff meeting and was willing to provide a written account. That account became page 31 of the 47 pages. The email went out on a Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. It was addressed to the CEO, the CFO, the General Counsel, and every member of the Board of Directors of Renwick Hospitality Group. It was also addressed in a separate send to the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, the Louisiana Attorney General's Office, and Dr. Philip O.C. Ware at Tulane, who had agreed, upon reading a summary, to serve as an expert witness should the matter proceed to litigation. The subject line read, "Formal Notice of Civil Rights Violations, Renwick Hospitality Group. Pattern documentation enclosed." Hector had drafted the body of the email. It was 3 paragraphs. The first described the incident. The second cited the investigative findings across 6 properties. The third outlined the legal exposure under federal civil rights statutes, the Fair Housing Act as applied to public accommodations, and Louisiana state law. It noted that the matter had been referred to the DOJ and the state Aggie. It noted that Adelaide Marsh was prepared to proceed to litigation, and that she was also prepared to discuss resolution. It noted that she had given the matter 11 months of careful preparation and would not be deterred by delay. Attached were all 47 pages. The response came in 4 hours, not from a PR department. From the General Counsel directly, a woman named Patricia Staines, who asked if Adelaide would be available for a call. Adelaide said yes. She invited Hector. She took notes throughout on her legal pad. Staines began the call by expressing regret. Adelaide thanked her and asked whether Renwick Hospitality intended to acknowledge the pattern across 6 properties, or only the incident on the night of September 19th. There was a pause. "Both," Staines said after a moment. "Good," Adelaide said. "Then let's start there." What followed was not fast. It was not a single dramatic confrontation. It was 40 days of calls and documents and revisions. Hector spent more hours on it than he billed. Adelaide's assistant cleared 3 afternoons a week on her calendar for it, without being asked twice. Mitchell Renwick resigned as general manager of the Ashford Grand property 14 days after the email. The official statement cited retirement. Warren Ogle was placed on administrative leave. Spencer Tilton, the desk clerk, was reassigned to a non-guest-facing role. No disciplinary language was used publicly in any of these actions. But they happened in sequence, within 18 days. The investigation Renwick Hospitality, commissioned, conducted by an outside civil rights firm, at Adelaide's insistence as a condition of any discussion, confirmed discriminatory disparities in guest treatment across 4 of its properties. The report, which Adelaide had negotiated the right to review before any settlement discussions concluded, was 49 pages. She read every word. The settlement was substantial. Adelaide had not done this for money, and the settlement reflected that a significant portion was directed to 3 civil rights organizations she named, including a housing discrimination legal aid clinic in Baton Rouge that had been operating on a deficit for 3 years. The remainder addressed damages. There was a non-disparagement clause. Adelaide negotiated out of it the right to say, in general terms, that a resolution had been reached and that she was satisfied with its terms. There was also a consent agreement requiring Renwick Hospitality to implement third-party civil rights training across all properties, to establish an independent guest equity review process, and to submit annual compliance reports for 5 years to an oversight monitor. The monitor was Dr. O.C. Ware. Hector told her afterward, over coffee in his office, that it was the most thorough private civil rights enforcement action he had seen conducted without a single press conference. "You didn't want the press?" he asked. "I wanted the outcome," Adelaide said. The Baton Rouge Advocate ran a story in March. Adelaide had not called them. One of the civil rights organizations she'd named in the settlement had. The story was accurate and restrained, and ran on page 6 of the Metro section. By evening, it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. By the following morning, the Advocate's story had been read 400,000 times. Renwick Hospitality's communications office released a statement. It was careful and corporate, and described the settlement as reflecting the company's commitment to equitable guest experiences. It did not use the word discrimination. Adelaide read it once and set it down. James read it standing at the kitchen counter and made the sound he makes when something is half right and he is choosing to accept the half. "It'll have to be enough," he said. "For them," Adelaide said. "Yes." She was already at the kitchen table, legal pad open, writing. She had heard, through Hector, about a woman in Houston who had experienced something similar at a different property, different chain, same pattern. The woman's name was not public yet. She had not found an attorney she trusted. She had been sitting with what happened to her for 7 months without knowing where to take it. Adelaide wrote the woman's name at the top of a new page, underlined it, wrote 3 questions beneath it, paused, then wrote a 4th. Because that is who Adelaide Marsh is. She does not stop when the case closes. She does not stop when the settlement is signed and the check clears, and everyone on the other side of the table goes back to their offices and their regular days. She just opens a new page and starts again. So here is what I want to ask you, and I mean this genuinely. I want to see your answer in the comments. If you had been standing in that lobby on the night of September 19th, if you had been the person next to Adelaide when the security guard materialized out of nowhere, when the manager appeared with his smooth apology and his offer of a lesser room, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Would you have argued? Or would you have gone back to your hotel 4 blocks away and opened a legal pad and started writing everything down, every name, every time, every word you could still hear in your head, because that's where it started. Not in a courtroom, not with a press conference. With a woman at a breakfast table who was angrier than she was showing, and a yellow legal pad, and the decision not to let it go. Drop your answer below. Share this if it hit you somewhere real. And if you want more stories like this one, you already know what to do.